Okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to try and not make this too much of a tirade. I'm going to divide this kind of video that I'm going to make into two areas. And the first area is really about people's perceptions of what it is to learn how to play jazz. And the second thing is a little bit more theoretical. It's about how the current paradigm, at least as I understand it, of jazz education is a bit misleading in terms of harmony. So let's get on to the first bit anyway. So I've been lurking around at sort of internet forums, and people ask lots of questions on there. And asking questions, nothing wrong about that, but it's quite interesting that sort of questions that get asked. And one question that seems to get asked a lot is, okay, I'm trying to learn jazz, what theory do I need to use? What note choices must I make to sound jazz? Which is often, well, not always, but often coming from people who are, have a bit of a shred rock background or whatever, and they're kind of approaching jazz as a sort of new extra hat they can sort of wear, or, a new layer of complexity and coolness they can add to their playing. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. I think you can get a sort of an element of jazz in your playing and then still be very much a rocker. I mean, there's quite a few guitarists around to do that. But so that's one aspect of it. And also, when I was starting, I was kind of the same. I was like, where are the jazz notes, And of course, having studied jazz for a couple of decades, I now realise that, of course, it's a lot more complicated than that. But so the question is interesting in itself, and often I sort of find myself asking questions like, well, I mean, what guitar players do you like? What jazz guitar players do you like? Or, just what guitar players do you like generally? Because that tells you a lot about, who a player's into. I mean, often, people come at jazz from the angle of, like, Alan Holdsworth or somebody, and of course that is not traditional changes playing. That's not the stuff I do on a daily basis, although Alan's great, obviously. So I think there's this perception that jazz is to do with theory and to do with numbers and everything else. And of course, most straight-head jazz guitarists who actually work in and who are professionals are mostly interested in learning tunes, playing changes and swinging, playing good rhythms. And when they play changes, they're interested in playing phrases that outline the chords beautifully and flow, and are very, they can invent in a very natural way. So it's not really about what cool theoretical things can I do. It's more like, how can I play beautifully through the song. On the contemporary side, I do think it's a little bit more like, what cool stuff can I do intellectually to this music. I'm not really generally fond of that particular sort of strand of contemporary jazz. I mean, I think it's quite possible there's lots of contemporary jazz artists who don't do that, but I think there's something about the educational system which kind of encourages people to think and come up with systems or ways of doing things that are quite mathematical or based in some idea of apparent complexity, which to me is great. I mean, I'm interested in that stuff, but I don't see it as primarily what jazz is. And what jazz is music. It's a tradition that's to be found on the records because it grew up in the recording era, and you can sort of check that out for yourself. And that's it, really. I mean, there's not really much more complicated than that. You get good enough, you listen, play along with records, and you get good enough to the point where you can get gigs, and then you play with good musicians, and you get better. And you play with better musicians, and you get better, and you learn. That's the experiential way of learning, and that's the way most good jazz musicians I know have learned how to play. What they tend not to do is ask questions from internet forums. So that's interesting in itself. I mean, it's like anything. I just find people who ask, how do I play jazz, and then haven't actually checked out any jazz, a little bit strange, because I feel like if you don't like jazz, then why play it? I mean, it's not like we get any kudos in society. It's not like, people don't throw money at you. Well, they might throw rotten vegetables at you, but spit at you in the street, and the children scream and they run away, and rightly so, really, because you are essentially a social outcast when you play this music. I think what happens a lot is you kind of go to music shops, and you're testing out a new amp or something or a pedal, and you start playing all this jazz stuff, and people, because it's just what you do, and people go like, oh, he plays jazz, and it's like, well, yeah, I've been doing it for like 20 years. It's like I don't do anything else really apart from play jazz, and that's my thing. I don't like other styles of music, and I admire people who play like rock really well. It's not like I'm sort of passing judgment on everybody else for not being a jazz player. It's just that's kind of my thing, And I think people sort of they see it almost as like a bucket list. It's like, what do you do? Learn how to sweep pick, learn how to play jazz. It's funny. Some conversations I've had with like non-jazz guitarists, very different value system, very strange and alien to me. So I think for a lot of people, jazz exists as a slightly frightening or intimidating thing that therefore they feel that they should be able to conquer, or and actually it's really not. It's something that sucks you in and ruins your life. Okay, so yeah, so that's interesting. So that's a question you get a lot, and it's people just wanting to know what the numbers are. And then, like, even I think in the case of quite experienced and good sort of jazz students and stuff, you still get this a little bit, and you kind of have to spoon feed people a little bit at the early stages because they are only learning, and you want to give them something nice to play, don't you? So you tab things out, and you kind of but all the while trying to sort of nudge them in the direction of checking out their own stuff and working on their ears and all that kind of thing. It's a balance, really. But after a certain point, it's like, well, I mean, I think every sort of beginner to intermediate jazz student should be able to get a few phrases of Miles Davis or Jim Hall down. Even if it takes them all afternoon, it's just to get one lick down. It's still a really worthwhile thing to do because it's working their musicianship, and of course the more they do it and the more they learn to like it, they'll have a knock-on effect, and they'll start finding out their own shit. They'll be. I mean, I've had students come back with me and say, "Oh, what's out this Django thing? And it's incredible." I'm looking at them going, "I can play that," and that's really nice when that happens. That's like, and then they don't need me anymore, and they can go off and they can be musical adults, and that's great. I mean, really, my job is about making myself out of work. Hang on, maybe I should spoon feed more stuff. Actually, that's a really serious point. I mean, because like people are very kind of they're looking for information when actually the last thing they need is information. What they need is experiential knowledge, and there's lots of people out there selling information to people on the internet, going like, these are the scales you need to know. This is blah blah blah. This is blah blah blah. And that's great, but at the same time, it's not going to help them really. But perhaps it creates a dependency, and that's there's an industry aspect to it, and perhaps in all this jazz education and everything is about essentially money and making money, and that's, you've got to keep your eyes on that. It doesn't mean that the information is wrong, but it means that you've got to be aware of what's driving people, because there's not a huge amount of money in playing jazz gigs. Well, there is if you trick career perhaps. So anyway. I want to move on a little bit because the specific question was, what do you play over Kind of Blue? And that's really an interesting question because I didn't know the answer. Sorry, all blues from Kind of Blue. That's an interesting question. I didn't really know the answer, and it's a tune I've always actually struggled with. And because it's a specific type of jazz repertoire which is kind of associated with beginners, it doesn't get called very often. Professionals are kind of snotty about that kind of repertoire. It's considered to be, if you shout at people, go, "Oh God, no, I don't want to play that one. Oh no, let's call something else. Oh, East of the Sun, yeah, that'll do." It's kind of like considered to be like, the House of the Rising Sun of Jazz or whatever. And the reasons for that are obvious. There's only 4 chords in the thing, and they're slowly moving. The melody's simple, so it's easy for people to get improvising on it in chord scale theory, even though their improvisations will not actually be jazz in the slightest because they haven't got the language yet, the rhythmic language. So I mean that's kind of why people do it, of course, which is a shame because I mean those records are great, and actually I mean it's a cool composition, all blues, and lots of great jazz musicians have played all blues, such as like Jim Hall, Chet Baker, and so on. So I mean you can't really say it's people covered it, and then it got a bit out of control, it was a bit overplayed. There's loads of tunes like that, and So yeah, so I mean, I hadn't really sort of studied it, you know, and then somebody said, well, what do you play over it? And I thought, well, you've got these chords, and the obvious choice would be to play, I mean, at least for me, chord scale-wise, would be to play, you know, the altered scale over the D7 sharp 9, and then over, same thing up a half step. That sounds rubbish to me. I mean, that modulation, or that sort of resolution from this chord sounds a bit awkward, you know? Especially that when you're moving down from the E flat 7, sharp 9, there's this thing. That sounds like mathematics, not music to me. I don't really like that very much. So I mean, so people are asking this question, you know, what scale would you play over these chords? And I think, well, I mean, first of all, A, I don't know, and B, why are you asking me? Because I'm a random internet doofus. I mean, why ask random internet doofuses anything? We all play the guitar to various levels. Some of us might be professionals, some of us might be beginners. Is there any way of telling that on the internet right way? Probably not. And even ones who are professionals, are we John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, Chet Baker, Jim Hall? No, we're not. So, I mean, why ask me? I'm just an idiot. You know, you might as well just go on the internet and look up a recording, which you can do for free or very little money if you're going to be legal about it. Yes, it's probably best to be legal about it. You know, download the track from iTunes for like $1 or whatever it is. You know, and then just listen to it. And there's plenty of apps that you can use to slow it down. But I mean, really, you know, you shouldn't need to slow down a Miles Davis solo particularly, because you should be able to hear the notes and sing them back, you know, and check that they're right, and then work out what they are on the guitar, and then see what you notice. You know, that is what I did, and then I came up with this realisation that actually what they play over, you know, D7 sharp 9, D7 sharp 9 and the E flat 7 sharp 9, is in general just pretty simple. You know, they're thinking about this note, the flat 3 or the sharp 9 over the top of their D7 chord. The composite sound is D7 sharp 9, but they're not really worried about the F sharp or the G on the E flat chord. They're only really interested in that. So they're kind of doing that. So let me just try and do that properly. So sorry, so it's this kind of thing. Which sounds much better to me. Sounds much more natural, that resolution. Sounds like it can be much more melodic that way than using the altered scale or the half hold or anything else. So just to recap what I'm doing, I'm basically just taking the notes of, especially concentrating on the sharp 9, the notes of the G mixolydian mode, or maybe if you prefer D minor pentatonic. Or if you want to look at it chord scale wise, it's D Dorian, isn't it? And then same thing up a half step. That seems to be what most of those guys are doing on the record. I mean, I'll have another listen to get into that. But that's told me something quite interesting, which the theory books would never have told me, which is, I mean, it kind of is borne out by what I've noticed from bebop transcriptions that I've done, or bebop melodies that I've learned, which is very often, you know, when Charlie Parker's going to play, you know, a resolution into a G chord, you know, he might play something like this. That note there, F, well, the chord underneath it would be probably A minor D7 or just a D7. And that note there, he's not worried about that, he's just playing the F. You know, that's what he'll do. And he can create all kinds of like vertical theories as to what he's doing. But I mean, in terms of my understanding, what comes from like probably the more traditional jazz educators like Barry Harris and David Baker and people like that, is that really, I mean, Charlie Parker's just playing a descending F mixolydian, so it's like a tone below the G chord, which makes it a backdoor. You know, that's basically what he's doing. That kind of thing, right? You know. That's kind of thing. I mean, you can trace it back to like early English choral music, like Thomas Tallis does this sort of thing, you know. It's not like they're not too worried about the vertical ramifications, because that is a strong line. That's going, and it's going to resolve on a strong note over the G chord. I mean, you can put that in as well if you want, but I mean, then you could analyse it as a whole half scale or half whole, whatever it is, or you know, an altered scale or so on. But it doesn't really matter, because it could be any of those things, and it's all of those things, and at the same time, it's none of those things. It's just a melodic line, okay, and it's kind of as much based over the F7, or you know, if you want to do a tritone sub, you can do something based on the dominant half step above the G chord, so the A flat 7, you know. And all of those work very well as explanations, and you can just go through the whole of bop, really, as far as I've seen it, and just not invoke any of these exotic modes at all. Or you can if you want, doesn't really matter. Your understanding is up to you. And why would I take away something that's so personal and so much a journey as your own understanding of how the music works? I mean, I talk about this stuff because this is how it makes sense to me, and my playing is based on these concepts, and as a result it will have a certain colour and a certain sound, because that's the way I'm hearing things, you know. Somebody else will have a different way of hearing things, and their colour will be different. Something about their playing will have different quality, you know. So I think that's when you stop looking for right and wrongs, and you kind of become a little bit more of a musical adult, maybe, when you realise that. And I don't think you have to be an advanced player to do that. I think you can take the reins of your own education right away, and you can start to look into these things and kind of get interested in what's going on in actual music, as opposed to some theory. And then you might find that the theory you've learned, and I don't think there's any shortage of theory on the net, I think there's loads of information out there, the theory you learn, you can either find it supports what you see, or you can find that it disagrees with what you see. The point is not to take my word for it, because, as I say, I'm just a random internet doofus. I mean, you might like my playing, you might not like my playing, you might think I'm talking total crap, but the thing is that you are entitled to your opinion only because you've checked out the stuff yourself, and you can say, oh yeah, but in this bar, look what Charlie Parker does, and I might go, oh yeah, you know what, that is a half-whole scale, you're right, I can't see any other explanation of it. You know, I saw a half-whole scale in Wayne Shorter's playing on one of his tunes, for example. You know, so I mean, certain players do. You know, so it's just that knowledge. It's like, it's not about information. It's about understanding the context and the way the language developed. And obviously, you can't understand everything. But if you home in on the stuff that you're interested in, then your playing will reflect that in a really organic and beautiful way, and you will become a musician and somebody with a personality as a musician. I honestly believe that. It's like. So I think all the answers are on the records, and I think, you know, I mean, people who nod their heads are probably, I'm preaching to the choir, probably hear a bit if anybody's watching this at all, you know. Someone would say, yeah, he's right, you know. That's great, but I mean, really, I want people who don't think this way to think this way, because I think it will be a lot more fun. And it was certainly more fun when I started getting into it. You know, I used to worry so much about playing the right notes, you know. But it's not really about that. It is about right notes in the sense that you have to hear them and you have to feel them, but it's not about right notes in the sense that there's some theoretically correct way of playing them. And I think this idea of like modern jazz harmony, where everything seems to have to be related to an underlying chord, is at worst a bit, you know. Well, I mean, at best it's just a bit of a kind of simplification, and at worst it's actually quite damaging, I think, as an idea. I just wanted to, before I go, I just wanted to point out, like, David Liebman talks in this first chapter of his book, Chromatic Approach to Jazz Harmony, about how extensions got started in jazz, and his idea is that basically it comes from blue notes and chromatic notes and melody, which are normally blues notes. And a good example of that would be something like Mood Indigo. It's a very simple melody, right? Very bluesy. Chords that go underneath it. And it goes. So that's nice, isn't it? So that blues note, that flat 3. meant to try it in this case, or if I put it up an octave, I could probably fit I definitely could, so 7 sharp 5 chord in there, or 9th, it's a little bit more modern, but, and that's how they used to do, that's where these funny altered dominants came from, really. It's a sharp 9, not quite as common in the sort of repertoire as the same. If I go, so here you go. Let's try that again. The different substitutes you can do, melodically based around that, So that's quite a nice way to think about harmony, and I think it's the old way of thinking about harmony. And I think the more you do like kind of chord melody arrangements, or whatever you want to call them, the more that will come out. I think David Liebman's book is interesting because it's not going for a kind of a vertical idea of jazz harmony. He's thinking about layers and what one chord put on top of another chord, and that kind of rings a little bit truer to my mind. I haven't read this book for a while, but it rings a little bit truer in my mind about how bebop actually seems to be structured, which is, instead of thinking like, oh yeah, we're going to put this chord over this chord, it's almost like, here's a melodic cadence. Might outline a chord, it might outline a scale, but it's going towards this note, and then we're going to put this over this other chord, which happens to have the same function, and then the overall sound might be something like this, or that kind of thing, right? Just to give you an example. So I think like thinking in melodic lines and thinking in chords and things is really important, and the best way of doing that is just to go out and transcribe and look at stuff and see how you can adapt material, and that's really it. Anyway, that's a bit of a long answer to what is a quite simple question, but I think I don't want to come across as Mr. Boring or anything, but I do think like it's worth asking, or trying to direct the student towards asking questions that will lead to greater exploration. Just saying, what scale do I use? That's a closed question. But instead saying, well, have a listen to what a musician does over this that you like, and see what you notice. It's an open question and can lead to all sorts of avenues of discovery for the student and also for the teacher as well, because, I know I ask people to pay for lessons, but actually I learn as much from my students as they learn from me. That's the secret. So that's the way I view it, and it's about the process, and it's about true knowledge and not mere information for me, and it's taken me a long time to realise that, and it does help if you hang out with musicians who are experienced. Sometimes you'll think, why aren't they telling me, people don't talk about harmony very often when they get to a certain level, because for them it's just obvious, but also perhaps because they don't necessarily want to tell other people how to play, because actually you should find your own voice, and the way you find your own voice is through listening to others, to yourself on recordings, to the musicians you're playing with, and working stuff out for yourself, and being what I think of, what I call a musical adult, rather than just somebody who wants quick and easy answers all the time. Because it doesn't really matter, if you I don't know what the prize is for being a great jazz guitarist. I know what the prize is for aspiring to be a great player and trying to walk in the same shoes as the people who you admire, and trying to get closer to how they play, or the process that they learn music with. I can understand that completely, and that's something I try to bear in mind on a daily basis, and something I enjoy actually, and find a lot more fun than just getting answers. Sometimes if I've got a gig coming up and I've got to come up with something that I need to play over this chord, then I will, maybe Google something or work something out from a theory book, but it never feels terribly satisfying, and I never do my best playing. My best playing always comes from a place that's very considered and has involved a lot of listening and a lot of study, and that stuff I think I own, and the other stuff is just kind of, a quick fix. Anyway, sorry for going on for ages. I hope you found something useful about that. And catch you all for another video sometime if you haven't all gnawed your own arms off. Okay, take care, bye.